At the post-fight press conference at UFC 302, UFC President Dana White made headlines when he outright rejected the notion that lightweight champion Islam Makhachev is the #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world. He went on to say that anyone who calls Islam the pound-for-pound best fighter in the world when Jon Jones is still fighting is nuts and shouldn't be ranking the pound-for-pound standings or doing any rankings for that matter. And in short, he's right. I have to be clear about something. I personally have always felt like both the pound-for-pound rankings and the greatest of all-time conversation is one of the worst topics of conversation to be had in this sport. And I've always felt like these topics don't deserve 1/10 of the amount of time that they receive. I don't mean to be a Debbie Downer and not trying to take the fun out of the discourse when it comes to MMA. This type of thing can be fun to talk about for some, but I always felt as though it was ridiculous and that it garnered way too much attention in this space. I'll get back to that in a minute. But I will say, if I have to have this conversation and proclaim a #1 pound-for-pound fighter in the world right now, there's no way Makhachev is at the top of the list. Not if you're aware of the history of this sport and the context of what certain fights from years gone by represent. And this truly is in no way me trying to dress down the new fans. While I understand why some people get frustrated by commentary of fans who are new to this sport, the other side of it is that it's not their fault they're new. All anyone can do is form their opinion based on the perspective, and that's why every individual can participate in these conversations. But a lot of people who just got here a few years ago don't understand how monumental it was for Jon Jones to beat Shogun the way he did back in 2011. A lot of people either don't know or don't remember how remarkable of a feat it was to do, and in the fashion in which he did it. Especially taking into consideration the circumstances the whole thing was under. It was his teammate and at the time mentor Rashad Evans who was supposed to get that title shot, but after Evans got injured and had to pull out, Jones was told in his post-fight interview, just moments after beating Ryan Bader live on pay-per-view by Joe Rogan, that he would be fighting in the title in just a month and a half time. And at 23 years old, Jones showed up and absolutely dismantled Shogun in a performance that absolutely stunned the MMA world and set up the longest title reign the weight division has ever seen. Nobody appreciates Charles Oliveira as much as I do, but comparing Makhachev's title win versus what Jones did to Shogun and the way in which he did it and what that meant and how much it signified a changing of the guard and a new era in this sport, those two fights don't even belong in the same conversation. Jones's first two title defenses were dominant submission wins over Quinton Rampage Jackson and Lyoto Machida. And that simply dwarfs Makhachev's two title defenses against a featherweight, albeit a champion in Alexander Volkanovski, but a fighter from a lower weight class all the same. For Jones's sixth title defense, he put on one of the greatest fights of all time against Alexander Gustafsson. He had to go through hell and back, encounter serious adversity, only to rise to the occasion and to put the stamp on a thrilling fight in the fifth round to win. And again, a lot of people either forget or don't know how much of a challenge and a threat to the crown people saw Glover Teixeira when he finally made it to the UFC in 2013, and how many really felt that he would be the man to knock Jones off his pedestal. Even removing the no contest against Daniel Cormier, he still beat him fair and square the first time, along with many other legitimate dangerous contenders along after that. People are also forgetting that, in those days, it was the light heavyweight division that was the most talent-rich division in the sport, with the biggest stars in the game. When you have an understanding of these things, you understand that Makhachev just isn't there. Not by a long shot. With all that being said, I acknowledge that the game has evolved a lot over the years, and without a doubt, the fighters of today are much better than fighters of 15 years ago, generally speaking. Also, it's now the lightweight division that's one of the deepest divisions in the game when it comes to talent. I'm certainly not saying Makhachev isn't great, he is, but it's kind of ignorant to consider him comparable to Bones. It's a lot like the greatest of all time conversation. How can a fighter be the greatest of all time when the fighter who has that title changes every other week? And not even because of their own performances, but because of the other performances of fighters who happen to have performed more recently. How many fighters have been in the greatest of all time conversation over the past few years? 6? 7? How can something with such finality be one of the most fickle, ever-changing topics in the game? These topics are all subjective, not objective. Why do we continue to uphold these rankings? There are many other more worthy subjects to discuss in the sport than pound-for-pound lists and greatest of all time lists. If Makhachev wins his next 8 or so fights, then perhaps he can be compared to Jon Jones, but he's 3 or 4 years at least away from getting to justly be compared to Bones. Everything in the meantime is simply just social media hoopla, nonsense, and hype. For now, I just say we accept the fact that they're both great, and leave it at that.